Welcome. I'm so excited to have Firdos with us. I'll just do a quick little intro, then we're going to hop into the discussions around yoga and politics, and then we'll talk briefly about the course coming up. I feel very lucky to have Firdos with us. We're lucky to meet and cross paths, and I'm so grateful. I've just been so happy that we did ever since. She's a yoga teacher, she's a practitioner, she's a researcher. She's really passionate about the issues of decolonization and social justice and has all of the credentials to back it up. She has, first off, a master's degree in the traditions of yoga and meditation, and she's currently working on her doctorate titled Yoga, Politics, and Possibilities for Social Justice. She's also, if that's not enough, a South African correspondent for ESPN, and her classes have a really interesting mix of being able to weave in the historical and philosophical content as well as the anatomical intelligence. So she jives perfectly with us here at Yoga Medicine, and she draws on a wealth of of depth and experience in academic wisdom, teaching experience, and her own lived experience as a South African of Indian descent, and recognizes the shared suffering as an African and Indian through colonization. And I love this quote from your bio, so I'm just going to read it out. It says, her work is centered on amplifying both Africa and India's attempts to seek liberation of their resources, their cultures, and their bodies. So without further ado, we have Firdos. I'm very excited. She'll be leading our yoga and politics course. But what I want to talk about mostly on this call is, why is yoga and politics so important for students, teachers, anyone partaking of this incredible practice?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Tiffany, and for that lovely introduction. I just want to say, so that people know, as you mentioned, I have a real job as well, and my real job is as a cricket reporter. So I'm currently in Bloemfontein, which is in the central region of South Africa, covering the men's under-19 Cricket World Cup, and there are people around me who are going to learn all about yoga, whether they want to
By
or
the way,
not.
you might be able to try your AirPods again now that we have you, if you want to try it. It might be
Right?
worth
Just
just
so that I can
trying.
stop annoying everyone around me. It says my AirPods are connected. Can you hear me?
I still hear you, so I
Great.
don't
And
know.
I can hear
Try.
you through the AirPods. Perfect. Okay,
Okay.
that's better.
Yay!
So, yeah, I mean, thank you, first of all, for having me and for wanting to start this discussion. I think that question about why we want to have a course around yoga and politics is actually because I want to have a course around everything in politics. I just think that every situation that we exist in, whether we like it or not, intersects with politics, and also because I think the word political or politics has become so scary, so taboo, and it's something people really don't want to talk about because they think it means, it's that conversation you're going to have around the dinner table that is going to annoy someone, that is going to cause an argument, and that is going to make things uncomfortable. And really, what I'm trying to do is almost to decolonize the word itself. Politics is not a scary word. Being political doesn't mean being scary. It just means understanding your place in society, your positionality, everybody else's positionality. And it's actually a way to greater insight and greater knowledge, greater understanding, which is actually what yoga is. So that's kind of my linkage between the two. And then, of course, yoga, like pretty much everything that we've lived with, has become politicized. And when I say has become, I mean from the beginning. It's always had a place among a certain strata of society. It's always been practiced by a certain group of people. It's actually always been used by different people to signify different things. And whether that's, from the very, very top of the Indian government, and we're talking about the ruling party and the prime minister, or whether it's in space yoga, as I did for a long time in my research process, to help refugees find a way and a space of feeling at home in a foreign country that rejects them. Those are two broad political spectrums, and yoga sits in all of them.
Yeah. And even without really being able to see your face, I think it's so nice to have you here talking about it, because when you presented on the conference, Firdos presented on our Yoga Medicine Innovation Conference, which is kind of how we linked up, once I heard her speak for the first time, I was like, we need more of her. We need to hear more. I think, one of the things that really struck me about your presentation style too is it's so non-judgmental. It's so unbiased, which is so hard to come by, and really welcoming to talk about these topics, like you said, which can be really easy to shut ourselves off from and walk away from. And I think as yoga practitioners, it's really important to at least understand some of it. I mean, there's so much depth and there's so much there. You're spending your career studying it, and so I don't expect us to be on your level, but to at least start to get familiar with the concepts. Oh, there you are. I can see you now.
How strange. I'm sorry if there's a Wi-Fi situation. We've had
No.
a massive storm, which may have affected things, but you went fuzzy for me for a while too, and now you're back. I hope it stays. I've put everything
Yeah.
in the best possible way.
I'm just happy to
Tiffany,
have
what you're
you and hear
saying,
you.
what you've said is really interesting, because I think that part of the idea of non-judgment, I think people mean it's to accept everything and just to say that everything is fine, everything is I can accept everything. And actually that's not non-judgment. Non-judgment is hearing everything, and then even if you dramatically disagree with it, which I do over a lot of things, being able to understand another person's ability to think the way that they do.
Mm.
And if you have something that you think could lead the discussion elsewhere, you're obviously allowed to bring that in. I mean, we've had a political situation in South Africa very recently with our young cricket captain who expressed support for the state of Israel and was subsequently demoted from the captaincy, but not dropped from the team. And one of the reasons was that in our country, which is a constitutional democracy, where the constitution is largely respected, you are allowed to have your own freedom of expression. And freedom of expression means your right to say things I disagree with, and my right to disagree with them. And I think that that's really important. At the same time, that freedom carries great responsibility. And if you're willing to say something, you also have to be willing to have that point of view contended with. And I don't think it has to turn into anything nasty. I think it can just be a conversation, which is really what I try to do. It's the same as my asana practice, which I think always kind of takes second fiddle to everything else I do. But that asana practice is a conversation with your body, and it's about having that conversation on what is it I feel like today, what is it I don't feel like today, what can I do, what can't I do. And those are fine words. There's a lot of things I can't do, and maybe there's things I don't want to do. That's also fine. Can a running practice be a yoga practice? Can a swimming practice be an asana practice? The answer to all these things is yes. So that's the kind of conversation I want to get going. This is not going to be a history course without any contemporary rooting. We're going to talk about actual stuff that we're dealing with every day, whether it's the war on Gaza, whether it's the conflict in Ukraine. I live in South Africa. We live in an actively apartheid society. Even though we've dismantled the institutional structures, we haven't dismantled thought patterns. We haven't dismantled mindsets. You live in the US, you've got histories of settler colonialism, slavery, indigenous oppression, I suppose I'm going to call it, to deal with. And so all these things form part of the conversation we're going to have. And we may not always agree with each other, which is fine. I don't mind if people get a little bit sort of defensive or upset. It's about trying to understand. And yeah, that's what we're doing.
I love that. And, I think it's interesting too. So in this course, what I think is so great too is that the first part will be you presenting concepts and ideas. And again, I think from my experience with you, very unbiased, just, looking at what's happened and where we're at, and then being able to have those conversations in a welcoming environment, I think is so hard to find these days, because the conversations get heated so quickly. And I think what you so eloquently said before was like being able to see each other's shared experience, being able to see the different sides of this, and being able to talk about it and hold space. I think you are ultimately such a great person for that, being able to hold space for both viewpoints. And so I'm really excited. I already have it marked into my calendar.
Brilliant.
But
one thing I'm
the
going to say about the
conversations,
course
right?
is that the internet connection is going to be better. And
Because you'll
the
be at
internet
home.
connection is going to be better. So I'm going to be at home. So that's going to be better, I promise. But I just want to talk a little bit about that historical section of the course, which I think is, so first of all, I think we must understand that history is subjective because the facts are not always the facts. And because we're constantly learning new things about the things we thought we knew. So, you know, the history is not like, it's not maybe what you would have done in school, which is dates and places, and this is exactly what happened then. That's not the way that a history, especially a mostly oral history, has evolved over time. So that sort of history is shape-shifting and changing as we discover new things. And also, to be honest with you, as we conclude new things, because we don't really discover any more facts. We come to different conclusions about the facts that we have maybe found out something about. So that history segment, it's long, but we're condensing it in that, you know, we're covering 5,000 years of living, changing practice, and it will be condensed into our sessions in a way that is accessible to us, in a way that we can just ask pertinent questions like, who was this text written for? Who was practicing from this text? And then conversely, who was not practicing from this text? Who was denied access to this? And so we're going to look at what was and what was also left out. And then we're going to just look at the intersections that yoga has had with various different movements, whether it's the Indian independence movement from the 1930s and 40s, whether it's the civil rights movement in the US, the 1960s, whether it's the South African anti-apartheid movement, and the converse, you know, whether it's the anti-vax movement, whether it's the white supremacist movement. And like, you will, I'm sure, figure out over time, spending time with me, which side you think I may be on, but I'm not going to tell you which side to be on. And you can make up your own mind about how you see this fitting in, because the cool thing about it is yoga as a concept is really pliable, and it can really be molded and shaped to fit into many different things. And so that's what I want us to look at. So I think for people who want to join the course, being open-minded is really important. Being willing to hear things that are slightly uncomfortable, and then just being willing to engage in the conversation, and also not being afraid to voice an opinion, not being afraid to have that opinion challenged. I think that's the kind of space I'd like to develop.
Yeah. And I think, again, such a rare opportunity to be able to have those conversations. And I mean, one of the things I really love about our yoga medicine family and community is that we draw such open-minded people, and I think it really is such like, maybe the only requirement, like you said, is being open-minded and being able to see other ways of looking at things. And that doesn't mean you have to change your mind. It just means that we have the discussions, and that we as yoga teachers and yoga practitioners can really understand the nuances behind some of these traditions that we use every day. I'm going to go through the sections, and then if there's anything, I know you probably want to talk about all of them, but is anything specifically? So just so you get it, you guys listening get an idea of the course. The first, so it's a 6-section course. Again, each one will be about half Firdaus presenting, and about half, so 1 hour of each, and then conversational, you know, back and forth, which is just as, from what you've told me, just as much of the learning. Section 1 is systems of separation. Section 2 is the intersection of yoga and religion. Section 3 is colonization and yoga. Section 4 is yoga moves west. Section 5 is cultural appropriation and appreciation and Hindu nationalism. And Section 6 is what does yoga's political future look like? Each, you can imagine, jam-packed with a lot in it, but a lot of really good, important things, yeah.
Yeah, well, as you started listing the sections, I was just like, oh my gosh, I want to add this, I want to add this, I want to add this.
Of course.
And really, this course could be endless. So I think, I mean, I want to sort of point out a few of the things which I think are really important to the course. To start by saying all the sections are my favorite section, because I've only picked the things that I really want to engage with. But I think for our times today, the two sections that I think are very important to highlight are the intersection of yoga and religion, because I think that religion is so in focus at the moment. It's really, whether it's in the Middle East or whether it's in India, where really there is very heightened emotion around religion, and really heightened emotion around which religion people associate with, and also how that then forms their identity. So we're going to look at, people will often say, I hear this a lot, it really annoys me, is people who say, I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. Because like, I really want to ask them, what does that actually mean? Like, what do you actually mean? But explain to me, break it down forensically. What are you trying to say here? And I think what mostly they're trying to say is, I believe that there's something bigger than myself out there. I don't want to name it because that makes me uncomfortable. The word religion makes me uncomfortable because maybe I grew up in a religion I don't associate with anymore, or it just seems a bit old fashioned, or I just want to actually be a little bit cool. So I'm using a different word. That's fine. But really, we need to understand why we're saying that. And then we need to go through, and we'll find it's a lot of religions. And I mean, primarily, I'm a scholar of religion. I'm a history student. And I'm very open with saying I grew up in a South Asian Muslim home. All four of my grandparents were born in India. And that identity that I grew up with, but I also grew up in apartheid South Africa, where people of Indian origin were grouped together, and we had to live together because that was the way it was. So we lived, cheek to jowl, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and mostly Hindu and Muslim, and we did pretty much everything together. We would celebrate Diwali, we would celebrate Durga Puja, we would celebrate Eid, we would celebrate Ramadan. We did everything as an Indian community. So I feel like we have a good sense of each other's spiritual backgrounds, as well as what makes us different. And I think when we put yoga through that lens, and we look at yoga developing out of a Brahmanical tradition, getting sort of, I guess, associated with Hinduism, mostly through the colonial age. Hinduism is a largely colonial concept. Then filtering it through the lens of the Mughal era and Islam, and then going into, Christianity has a very big movement on being praiseworthy of the body. There is a big Christian movement, which I guess could be called yoga. And so we're going to look at all of those things, as well as the a-religiousness of yoga and the kind of way it exists in the world today. And I think that'll probably be one of the most interesting sessions. And then the other one that I know people love to talk about is yoga moving west, because that's been quite an interesting conversation topic over, I guess, since the pandemic, really, where the ideas of cultural appropriation became more present, and where people wanted to understand, am I stealing something? Who does this belong to? What can I say? What can't I say? Who actually came up with all of this, and who has ownership over it? So I think that session will probably be quite close to what contemporary teachers are dealing with. And I'm assuming that a lot of the people who join in this course will either be, very dedicated practitioners, people who are considering teaching, or people who are already teachers. And I hope that they engage with it from the point of view of, this is going to make me a better facilitator, and this is going to make me think a little bit more about the things I'm saying in class. And teachers, class is really long. I mean, one of my jobs is that I'm a commentator. I commentate for 8 hours a day on cricket. It's really long. You can say a lot of crap in 8 hours, which when you think about later, you're like, oh, did I really say that? The same thing with a yoga class. 60 minutes is really long. You can say a lot of things in that time, which you're saying because it's spontaneous, and that's great. But like, are we really thinking about the way that we're using words? So it's also a linguistic course, I guess.
Which I think is so fascinating because, the more I teach after 28 years of teaching, I feel like language becomes more and more and more important to me. And sometimes speaking less, sometimes asking questions, but I think our language is everything. And the yoga and religion I love, and I come from a very, very strong Christian background, and I love that you said that because I'm definitely one of those people who says I'm spiritual, not religious, but yeah, I mean, just this belief that there is something bigger than us, that there is something more than us. So I'm so excited about the conversations. I think one of my inclinations right now is just to think of imagining people feeling a little confronted about the conversations and feeling a little nervous about it. And I do want to just stress too that it is such a welcoming environment, I think, in yoga medicine, and to keep in mind that it is important to have these conversations, as uncomfortable as it feels, especially now. I mean, there's so much going on in the US too, and political and religious. And
Yeah.
I think it's important. I think our job as yogis is to be able to hold space. I mean, there's a lot of jobs we do, but one of them is holding space for all of that, for loving all of our students as they are and welcoming all of the religions and all of the viewpoints. And not that we have to bring those up in class because maybe the shared context is the physicality, but having at least some understanding of these things, I think is really important to our job as yoga teachers. And I will say, I think it's really funny that the one I thought you were going to mention was colonization and yoga, and you didn't.
I
But
will
obviously,
mention
that's
it.
your specialty, so that will clearly be an important one.
Yeah, that's a very important one. I guess I would almost want to, I mean, it's too late to change the wording now, but I want to almost change the wording into colonization, decolonization, and recolonization, because I think yoga's been through this process where it has been taken over by a certain group, and then it's been taken back, and then it's been passed forward, and then there's an attempt to remove it from all of that. And so it's not just colonization, which, you know, these are big words. We throw around the word decolonization all the time. And I've been thinking about this a lot in my work. I don't think that what we mean by decolonization is returning to a pre-colonial era. So decolonization is not pre-colonization, because pre-colonization had some problems also. So what we're actually wanting to do is we're wanting to, decolonization is a complete reimagination. It's a complete understanding of how can we create something which is radical, which allows us to bring in a bit of the practice of remembrance, because there has to be some kind of nod to what's happened, and then which creates a completely new world. And I don't even know if decolonization is the right word anymore. Like, I'm trying to come up with my own cool word, but I haven't come up with it yet. But that session is, of course, it's basically everything that we're doing today, right, in the yoga practice, because it's what happened when yoga became more asana based. It's what happened when yoga moved across the Atlantic Ocean and found its home really among a group of people who look completely different to the practitioners that were engaged in yoga for about 3,000 years before that. So it's gone from an Indian high caste male practice to a white, able-bodied, female, middle-class practice. And that's very different. That's, you know, two opposite spectrums of the world. And it's just mind-boggling to me that we haven't somehow said, hang on, how do we fill in these blanks? Because, you know, where is the, I mean, I'm actually doing a conference in Germany in May, where I've decided to look at where is the brown body in yoga? You know, where is the actual body of Indian heritage, I suppose? And that's the kind of questions we're going to ask as well. You also use the word, which I just want to touch on, in that you said that some of these topics may seem quite confronting, and they will be, and they are quite confronting. And I'm really of the opinion that being confronted is not a bad thing. It's actually the only way that we can really start to examine ourselves. I think hostile confrontation is maybe not what we're wanting, but, you know, discursive confrontation, intelligent confrontation, that's not a bad thing. That's how we actually learn. And so I really want to say to people who even have like a teeny bit of interest in this, that there is nothing scary about this. This is a very cool space. I'm probably going to say things that'll irritate you. You're probably going to say things that'll irritate me. All of us will be fine. All of us will be fine the next day. And having that conversation, you know, we'll think about it in months to come and be like, you know what, that was so interesting. She said that one thing once and it stayed with me, and I've like marinated over it. And now I think slightly differently. And really that's the magic. This course is really a course about deep self-development. And to me, it's just completely transformative, and it transforms me every time I teach it. So like, I need people to come so that I can get benefit as well.
Yeah. And I think it's a willingness to do better. I mean, we can all do better. And I think, to me, that's what yoga is all about, right? Whether we're talking about feeling better, you know, ultimately, I think a lot of the effects of yoga are about translating to how we live our lives and how we interact with people. And I think, you know, ultimately, we can all do better. And this course is really about being willing to show up and have the hard conversations, and also acknowledge that we will all accept and love each other at the end, regardless, and be able to hold space for all of the different viewpoints, and know that the conversations need to happen and the conversations will change us. in some way. It doesn't mean you have to change your viewpoint or your
Yeah.
religion, of course, but that they will change us and allow us to lead differently in our society. I think is so important as yoga teachers. I always think about this a lot, especially with elections coming up, of like, how different would the world be if everyone did a little yoga, was a yogi? Not necessarily that it would change our vote or change our political preferences, but that we would be more welcoming and accepting of other people too, and being able to hold space for the different viewpoints and see other people's viewpoints. So I'm so excited. I just feel so privileged to have met you and to be able to offer this to our teachers. I think it is such an important thing in the yoga world, an important thing to have as yoga teachers. And, I love that you're offering it to give us the knowledge, but then also equally just as much have the conversations, which is so important. So it'll be a special training, as I mentioned. I love. I'm personally really looking forward to it. I'll be there as a student. I'll be with you as a
Yeah.
student. I'm excited to share this with you, and thank you so much, Firdos, for putting it together for us and for um, creating space for us all.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And you said something so profound there. You spoke about your own elections coming up in the US. Um, you know, 4 billion people will vote this year. More than half the world will have elections. We have elections coming up in South Africa. The UK will have an election. Bangladesh has just had one. India will have a massive election. And we've all got some really big decisions to make. The right to vote is, one that is so precious in our country. That day, the 27th of April, 1994, I remember taking my grandmother into the voting booth. It was the first time people of color could vote in this country. We watched her, she was quite old. I watched her make her X on the voting ballot. And, we didn't realize the importance of that moment. That is one of the biggest choices we all have to make. And what you said about, if people did a bit more yoga, of course, it's not going to change our voting preferences, but it may well inform. This is a huge decision. It is a massive privilege to be able to go and vote. Nobody knows that better than us in this country. And just to be able to have some kind of influence over who makes these big, big decisions in our world. Doing downward dog may not, you're not going to, in that moment, be like, you know what? I've decided where I'm going to make my X. But you are going to learn something about what kind of life you think not just you, but everyone around you should be living and deserves to live. We don't only vote for ourselves. We vote for people around us who are wanting their lives to improve and be better. And I just think, you mentioned it. And as you said it, I was like, yeah, that's definitely one of the hooks for the course, is that so much of the world is voting this year. We're making big, big decisions.
Right.
We're led by strong men all around the world who are messing things up. And we can change that. And I'm not afraid to say that, even if somebody disagrees with me. We've got to do something, because it's in our power. It really is in our control. And I'm so glad you brought that up. We're going to talk about elections. We're going to talk about all the things.
Yeah.
I saw some of our students talking on the chat, and one of them has been with me since my very early days teaching. So I'm so glad to see you guys, and please come on the course. And yeah, we're going to have a great time is actually the point.
Yeah. And to that point too, it's just perfectly timed. And for myself, I just think elections have become so polarizing and such a great way to bring us all together and find a way. Again, it's not about changing minds, but about to have the conversations and the knowledge and understanding of other cultures and other ways of being. And in particular, this culture that has given us so much, this practice that has given us so much, that has been infused by so many cultures. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm so excited. We'll put some links in. You can go to yogamedicine.com under the Learn tab. If you go to calendar, you'll see it coming up right away. If you go to our calendar, you can sign up. We've tried to keep it very affordable and accessible so that everyone can join. If you have issues, we also have financial scholarships, and you can also, if you have any problems with that, you can always just email Katie, our wonderful, the brains behind the yoga medicine happenings, at info@yogamedicine.com, and she will help you out with whatever you need. Anyways, we're really looking forward to the conversations. Oh yeah, and what start Start date. So it's 6 2-hour sessions starting on February 13th. So you've got a little bit of time to think about it, but not too long. Grab a spot, and we will see you there. And thank you, Firdaus, for your time. Have fun at the cricket games, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Tiffany, and yeah, see everybody soon.
Thank you.